So I'm joined here with Steve O'Hara. Steve is flown all the way in from London just for this podcast. So thank you for coming here, Steve. We're here at the 8x8 offices, as you can see the logo back there. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no problem at all. In fact, I managed to fit in a load of other meetings.
Oh, that's good.
Just as an aside.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm here for the podcast, but
Yeah. Multiple.
Managed to fit in with speaking to my boss, board.
Oh, okay. That's good. Yeah, multiple birds, one stone here. That's good. Okay, we've got good levels. Everything seems to be good. All right, Steve. I'm going to dive right into it. So for people who don't know, Steve is the VP of Engineering at 8x8. Safe to say your focus is primarily contact center.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Forget contact center for a second. What was your first job?
My first professional job. People will be surprised really when they look at me and they think, well, he's a young-looking guy. Hey, it can't possibly be that old. But I graduated in 1986 with a degree in electrical and electronic engineering.
Right.
So not software at all. In fact, actually, I had not a great love affair of software. I worked for a company in the graduate training scheme called Hawke Siddeley Dynamics Engineering, which is part of the whole Hawke Siddeley group, about 35,000 people. They made everything from, well, in their previous life, aeroplanes, warships, mining equipment, all kinds of interesting, right across the whole group. And the bit that I worked in was based near London, and we specialised in critical control systems, things like mining control systems, controls of coal washers and coal crushers and conveyors and all that kind of underground, helicopter engine control systems. So,
that's important.
Yeah, the black box, the boxes that basically control the engines on a helicopter.
Right.
That's why when people talk to me about uptime, I have a very clear vision of what uptime looks like.
Yeah, no pun intended with the helicopter.
Well, if we talk a lot about 5 nines,
right.
99.999%
right.
uptime. If a helicopter pilot were to sort of shout over his shoulder to you when you're in a helicopter and say, "Don't worry, we've got 5 nines on this," you're unlikely to get into the most dangerous form of transport ever invented.
Yeah.
But the bit I worked on was marine side, and they were controls for everything on a ship to do with anything like engines, clutches, control systems.
Okay.
The compressors, anything.
Right.
I mean, literally anything. One of the stories I tell people is one of the first bits of software I got to write after I'd moved through electronics in the place was an algorithm to help control the compressors that blow air and draw water through the toilets.
Okay, so also very important.
Well, yeah, and the funny thing is, because I was a thrusting young Turk, and I thought, this is beneath my skills, and I had been told, my skills were particularly mediocre. In fact, Hawke Siddeley, very old-fashioned in many respects, and very harshly treat the new engineers. And I was told in no uncertain terms that the best thing to do in my first year is try not to kill anybody with anything that I wrote or made. But I remember complaining or sort of gently saying to one of the senior engineers, all I've got is this algorithm to work out how to control the toilets. And he took me aside and he said, "You don't understand." And the funny thing is, I'll be doing it right now. He said, "You are working on the most fabulous thing." What? It's tiny, thing. He said, "No, but if it goes wrong, the shit really will hit the fan." And you'll be telling this story in 30 years' time. And here I am telling that story.
On a podcast, no
on
doubt.
A podcast.
Oh, check that out. I'm kind of curious. How do you test that sort of system?
Oh, wow. When you are a supplier to the DoD or in our case, the MOD, testing is, let me give you an example. If you're working on a flight control system or an engine control system for flight,
right.
So my colleagues who worked on that side of the aisle,
right.
Most of that code was written in assembler /C. Now, C wasn't a recognized safe language in those days because you can subvert it, you can cast it, you can muck around with memory. So it meant that the 32 kilobytes of code took 6 years of testing. They attempted to test every single branch that the control system could take through the code. 6 years of flight trials. So you are testing statically, you're testing dynamically, you're testing on rigs, And the same for marine. Now, we didn't have quite the same scrutiny, but similar. If you're on a ship and you're going through a nuclear cloud, you need to wash the ship down.
Right.
You can't be mucking around with that stuff. It's life and death.
Right.
So the testing involved in that is extensive. Every single possible scenario. And this predates auto testing and inline testing inside the code itself.
Right.
This is manual testing.
Right.
Massive great test rigs of just buttons and lights and dials to turn things up and down, and page after page after page. The test procedures for a ship control system would be this high
From the ground.
It's
about 4
after
feet.
Page after page, yeah. And signatures, many signatures, manual signatures on everything to make sure that it was covered.
Wow.
So yeah, it's that system was a fiber connected controls of machinery in place, SCADA system, supervisory control and data acquisition systems, 120 kilobytes of code in each.
120 kilobytes of code, and the most important job was obviously making sure the shit didn't hit the fan, right?
Make sure the bog's flushed, yeah. And don't make a seal with your bum around the bog, because this is the reason why it's like
Wait, what?
Well, toilets on aircraft and toilets on ships have a similar.
They're scary.
Well, they have a similar sort of thing. They work on the Venturi effect. They're passing air and
Right.
water underneath, and it's sucking the stuff out.
Yeah.
It's not flushing it.
Yeah.
The water that is to cleanse the bowl, really. It's not to flush it away. It's sucked.
Yeah.
Now, we used to joke. It's quite a big sucking force.
Okay.
So never be tempted. Not that you would be. Never be tempted to lift the lid up and sit on the actual. And if you make a perfect seal with that, yeah, you might live to regret that.
Oh man, I don't even want to know. Okay. All right. Changing subjects. So using what you've known then, I guess, applying that to where you are now, what does the VP of engineering actually do? What do you do?
Well, I'm really where the buck stops for R&D for contact center 8x8. I'm a developer. I still develop code. There's about 160 people, engineers on contact center, developers front end and back end, but also support engineers, QE especially. They're the people in my orbit, not so much support, but the manufacturing of the actual code itself, the application. And my job is really to feed and water everybody, make sure everyone's happy, make sure we're making the right strategic decisions. Every day we're making tactical decisions about how to solve this problem or that problem, how we feed product with the features and functionality they want, but how do we write the code?
Right.
First thing I did when I got to 8x8 5 years ago was to write the coding standards for the Java applications. We have a mishmash of lots of different languages and paradigms and processes and policies, and it's about a matter of consolidating that so that everyone has the warm comfort blanket of knowing that they're writing the stuff in the right way, that it's going to end up with a good result.
Right.
And the VP role is to carrot and stick. It's make sure we're all pulling on the same bit of rope, we're all going in the same direction, and we all feel like we're being vital to the output.
Right, right. So what is the trickiest part about building a contact center on the software side of things?
Well, a contact center, for everybody else's benefit, traditionally people used to call them call centers because it implied that they were always voice. It's a phone call. And there's two types of traditional call centers. There are outbound and inbound.
Okay.
And we generally deal with inbound, but a blend of those. And outbound is your traditional cold calling robocaller based in some horrendous place.
Yeah.
Very, very high turnover of staff because nobody can take the attrition.
Right.
I mean, it's really tough in this place. You're judged on the amount of time it takes for you to make a call, create a lead, do something.
Right.
Those outbound places are horrendous. Inbound is generally much higher value types of contact centers, whereby people are phoning you out of their own volition. They want help. They want to buy something. They've made the conscious effort to contact you, and generally the requirement there is that the person that's answering that interaction knows a lot more about the product, is there to help them,
Right.
help sell something, help fix something, help
Right.
take a complaint, this kind of thing. Much higher value. Whereas outbound, it's bash, bash, bash.
Almost like spam.
It is, and in the Western world, robocalling is almost outlawed.
Okay.
It's very hard now. I mean, the compliance and everything else associated with calling people is so tough in UK, US, Western world, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, these places, that it's becoming a really tough business.
Right.
You can't really call somebody if you haven't been invited to call them in the first place.
That's like the rule of thumb.
Yeah. And then when you're doing that, even when you're robocalling, a very efficient outbound call center, contact center, is over dialing. So you get a list of numbers that you're calling. You don't dial them sequentially. You dial 4 at a time for one agent. On the basis that 3 people are not going to answer.
Is that why when you get one of those like spam calls, it takes a second for them to realize, oh, pick up on that one they've picked up, try to get them?
Yeah, and that's when you know that you're being. It's the start of a robocall because there's a bit of a delay.
Right.
Now that delay, interestingly, is one of the most irritating things, and that is one of the things that legislated for. So compliance in the US and UK dictates that there cannot be more than 2 seconds before that call is connected to the person and an agent.
Okay.
And when you think about that, when you're overdialing at 4 times the rate and this kind of thing, and some people are answering, others aren't,
right,
creates for a very dynamic algorithm that's got to manage that.
Interesting, because you've got to be quite fast.
Very fast.
Or maybe you have some sort of, I don't know, audio clip that plays, and then you catch up as the person. You can't do that.
No, you're not allowed to do that.
Oh, okay.
No, you're not allowed to do any of that sort of
Okay, so this has all been done before, clearly.
Oh, yeah. And the fines for this kind of stuff are horrendous. You get, if you contravene any of these regulations associated with that, it's a proportion of the value of the company, that kind of thing.
Oh, like the GDPR fines, their percentage, right?
Yeah, it's similar. It's treated really seriously.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay.
And that's the reason why, in contact centers, we invent things like persistent connection. So an agent will come in the morning. If they're in these kinds of environments, even if they're not, there's some advantage to doing it this way. Because contact centers, it's all about driving efficiency.
Right.
How many calls have you made?
Right.
There's some rules of thumb that say, in a million calls, 1 second per call is $1 million wasted, kind of thing.
I see.
Persistent connection, we used to call it off hook. An agent comes in the morning, connects, dials up, the system calls them, they're connected, they never disconnect. Their phone is now live.
So they never disconnect, but they talk to a whole bunch of people.
Yeah.
Because that would waste time if you had to disconnect.
Exactly. So when a call comes in, it's got to be connected to an agent, and so that means phoning their phone.
Right.
Don't want to waste that time, even when we're on VoIP. Obviously, our whole system is VoIP.
Right.
That's still a delay. So cut that delay out. Permanently connected.
Okay.
And what they hear is a beep to tell them, right, you're on the next call.
You're on. Interesting. Okay, so for the people who don't know, I want to sort of go through some of the nomenclature. You mentioned agent, call, outbound, inbound, which I think you've explained. 8x8 focuses mostly on outbound. Inbound, sorry. Got that backwards. Just checking to make sure you're paying attention. Mostly on inbound, so not the spam stuff, which is good.
We do have customers that do outbound.
But they're probably not spammers, right?
Of course not. Absolutely not. We couldn't. No, we don't support that.
Okay. What are some of the other terms? So what is an agent? Agent's the person that answers the calls?
Yeah. So the agent is the person sitting in the contact center or sitting at home. Because one of the great things about 8x8 is it's cloud-based.
Okay.
There's nothing to install on your laptop.
Okay.
It is all coming through the browser. Absolutely everything, including the voice. Our softphone is embedded actually in the browser itself.
Okay.
So you don't need anything. You can have a headset. You don't have to have a headset. You could use the mic and the speakers on your laptop if you want.
Right.
So everything is delivered via the browser to wherever the agent is. Generally, they used to be in offices, but now they're in homes. But fundamentally, it's really about connecting a customer with somebody who can handle the customer's inquiry.
Right.
And the person that does that is an agent, and obviously the customer is the person that's phoning in.
Right.
Now, increasingly, they're not phoning in; they're texting, or they're using the web chat on. You see it everywhere now.
Right.
You
The
know,
little thing in the bottom right corner of a
yeah,
website.
do you want to chat with an agent? And of course, the first thing that you find is you're not chatting with an agent, you're chatting with a bot. You know? So you've got to get past the bot. And they're deflecting. They're trying to find ways in which they can answer your call
Right.
much cheaper than sending it to an agent who will
Right.
speak to you.
Right.
So they're there to try and deflect those calls, to answer the calls. But eventually, you get to a point where you either type in some trigger words that alert the system to say, "Oh, right, now hang on a minute,
Yeah.
no more of this. Let's push it through to a person."
Right.
Or you get to the point where the bot can't help, and it needs to talk to an agent.
Right.
And what happens there is you don't get directly connected to an agent straight away. You get put in a queue.
Okay.
And then you might get some in-queue treatment, which is some feedback about where you are in the queue, how long you got to wait, and this kind of thing. And the queue is emptied by agents that become available to feed the queue.
Okay.
So that happens whether that's a voice interaction, so you phone in, you hear on hold music, whether you're sending in a web chat, so you're chatting, you send in an SMS text, you're on WhatsApp, send in or Twitter, or via email. All of these channels I cope with. And that's called an omni-channel experience.
Right. Meet them where they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And sometimes it's the same interaction on different media types. So you start with a chat and you transfer to voice, this kind of thing.
I see.
So that's what a first-class contact center does.
Right.
It's truly omni-channel, covers multiple different channel types.
Right. Okay. So obviously that's the difference between call center and contact center. And I imagine all that information about the history of your maybe support request is sort of tracked no matter which.
Well, that's
medium.
where it crosses over into being a CRM. So
Okay.
that's why contact centers generally, unless it's a low-cost contact center or a pop-up contact center, where you don't have your own CRM, customer relationship management system, we integrate, and all contact centers do, with your incumbent CRM.
Right.
So it might be that it's Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce or something like that. So the call comes in, it's in our queuing system and everything else. And the moment the agent actually decides they're going to take the call, there's a screen pop.
Right.
And that's come from the CRM.
Right.
It's come from Salesforce.
Okay.
And it tells you everything about the customer,
Right.
the history of the customer and everything else.
Right.
But the contact center software itself has handled how that interaction actually got to the agent in the first place.
Okay. So I imagine it's trying to figure out who's the right person to answer this. This person's an expert on X, Y, and Z.
And that's skills-based routing.
Okay. We're
So-
covering all the things here.
We are. I mean, yeah. I mean, this is the difference between just having, a receptionist
Right.
and a contact center.
Right.
Because you could say, well, a lot of this stuff is covered by just having a decent VoIP phone system. You phone in, and it says press 2 to speak to Matt, press 3 to speak to Steve, this kind of thing. Yeah, that's great. But what segregates or separates a contact center from a simple calling system like that is you don't know who you want to talk to.
Yeah.
You know what your problem is that you want to speak about,
Right.
and that will inform the system, and the contact center takes a view as to
Right.
who's the right person for you to talk to.
Right.
And that's what used to be called skills-based routing, is now called attribute-based routing.
Right.
And it's, the call is coming on a Spanish line, somebody
Okay.
speaking Spanish. So
yes.
you need to route it to somebody who speaks Spanish.
Right.
Somehow we figured out, hopefully by pressing a few sort of buttons, but prior to the interaction forming, that it's about car servicing.
Right.
So you want to send us that person. And then you want to say, okay, take some measurement of agent performance.
Uh-huh.
Who's really good at handling those and who's not so good, who's not doing it today, who's
Right.
not really up for it today,
Right.
kind of thing, and start feeding those. So it's very dynamic,
Right.
very sophisticated.
Yeah.
And that's really the differentiator between a simple unified communications phone system and a contact center.
Right. Okay. Wow. So there's a lot there.
Well, there's probably there's more work goes into that routing aspect than any other part of the contactor itself. Recordings, quality feedback.
Right.
You get a call and it says we're recording this.
Yeah.
This call because for training purposes.
They always say it may be recorded, but it's always recorded, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It depends really, actually, because you pay.
Ah.
So
So if
the
they've
owner of
run
the
out of
contact
money,
center-
maybe not so much.
Yeah, maybe they don't turn off the recordings. But mostly what they're really talking about is that what you're saying and what the customer is saying
Mm-hmm.
is being fed into an AI engine to determine what the sentiment is.
Okay.
So then maybe feedback to the agent whilst he's speaking, whispering we call it. Maybe talk to them about this. Hang on, the customer's getting angry.
Yeah.
Maybe, let's try to steer them to this, or give some advice.
Right.
So the system starts whispering there based on the feedback that it's analysing from the content, whether it be text or voice.
Right.
So with voice, it's speech to text, real time, and then feeding it back while you're on the interaction.
I see.
And that's where the really high value contact centres are.
Okay. Yeah. So
That's where our QM, our quality manager product, comes in.
So you can train them, help them during the calls.
Yeah,
help them
and
become
then
better.
obviously post call, a bit of training on the customer
Right.
to say, look, looking down a history or feedback that you're getting here, and what we're seeing with the way you're handling some improvements, and that's what they mean by training purposes.
Yeah. Huh. I feel like that would be a lot of fun just to know about my calls with customer support agents.
Yeah.
Flip the script, at least for me. Like when I'm trying to cancel, something and they won't let me cancel, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and sometimes calls are directed to agents that are very good at handling difficult customers. Or we've got mission critical contact centers, and what we mean by that is we've got people that run suicide lines.
Oh.
Yeah. And so it's super important that the reliability of that line. Somebody calls up, they're calling for a really specific reason, and
right.
that is they want some advice, they want some help, they want some reassurance.
Right.
So you need trained people that can counsel, can have high empathy and all those sorts of things to be able to handle that. So routing is really important in those circumstances.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons.
So when you're building all this stuff, you mentioned earlier when someone calls in or messages in, a screen pop comes up and it maybe pulls in information about maybe the customer, or maybe you don't know anything and it says we don't know much about this person, etc.
New contact.
New contact. What other sorts of integrations are there today besides pulling in existing data just about the customer?
Well, it's really interesting actually, because what it can be is that before the agent actually gets the call, it's been through what we call our interactive voice response system, and that is, comes through and says press 1 to talk to somebody in service, press 2, but it also might be, is your inquiry about parts? Is your inquiry about a particular service? Could you type in your postcode using the telephone keyboard, or
right.
This kind of thing? Maybe a part number.
Right.
And of course, the part number, that's a lookup. That's a dynamic lookup into the parts catalog for the company.
Right.
So that by the time the agent does get to it, says, okay, now I can offer you this price or that price, or how many do you want of them?
I see.
It's all about really trying to automate as much of that as possible and get as much information before it comes to a human interaction. So integrations with existing parts catalogs, not just CRMs, but also other systems that customers have. And that's the reason why it's really important to have an open platform in this area.
Right.
APIs know very close to your heart, because we don't actually really know what customers are going to use it for.
Right. Right. Actually, some of the other podcast episodes are entitled, or the subject is APIs and IPAs. So there you go.
Okay, very good.
Very, very relevant. So I got so many questions. What are the biggest engineering challenges you face when you're building a contact center?
Performance and reliability.
Biggest ones?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the customer, he wants features. Customers want features. They want this to pop up, that to appear, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And we're a global organisation making this one product as a SaaS product for everybody. So to cover everybody's requirements for the features,
right,
without the thing growing like an octopus, and then not also being able to perform. These things sit on top of a microservices architecture increasingly. We've still got quite a lot of legacy code which runs in data centers.
Right.
And the challenge there is getting it to scale up.
Right.
8x8 contact center is 23 years old.
Wow.
It's based on a microservices architecture from 2000. It was written in 32-bit C code.
Okay.
It was way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Fantastic thing. But everything was proprietary.
Right.
The message bus, the event bus that it was on, it's pinned to certain versions of Linux, this kind of thing. And they take years to overcome.
Right.
Nothing really so much wrong with the architecture, just the implementations of its time.
Right.
And so bringing all that forwards and make it still perform.
Right.
Modernize the language, modernize the technology, modernize the scalability. That's a challenge.
Sort of moving this giant mountain that's been around for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, people call it, breaking down the monolith.
Right.
Into microservices. But the thing with microservices before, it's just the wrong type of microservices and too tightly coupled and all this kind of thing. Yeah, that's pretty tough.
Yeah.
And, in IT, this is not going to be your last job. It might not be my last job. When I started at Hawker Siddeley in 1986, people got carriage clocks when they retired after 40 years. I mean, we had loads of people doing that. The business was so large, you could move around it, work on different aspects of it, and have a whole career just inside that one business. And it wasn't that unusual. That's unheard of these days.
Yeah.
And especially in tech.
Yes.
If you've been anywhere for 5 years, people are saying, "Why are you staying there for 5 years?" Well, why not? I love it. It's interesting. It's paying well. It's
Right.
But it's kind of become the thing. It used to be that if you saw a CV and somebody had jumped between jobs 2 or 3 times in the last 5 years,
It was bad.
Yeah. That guy,
Yeah. He can't keep a job.
Yeah. But nowadays, it's that's
you can't get a new job.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and hiring is, you can make as many mistakes. I make as many mistakes hiring the wrong person as I do the right person.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it for years, and I'm still not getting it right.
How do you hire the right person?
If you find the solution to that problem, then I was talking to somebody recently, and they said to get the right person, we put them through 9 interviews.
Wow.
9 interviews.
You're gonna find someone really good at interviewing.
Well, and that's the other challenge. Is we ask our engineers and our peers to do the interviewing.
Yeah.
Well, why are they experts in interviewing?
They don't do it all day long.
We put them through HackerRank and some other stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, there are lots of different ways in trying to. But in the end, it comes down to: do you think they've got the right chops for this?
Right.
Do you think they demonstrated that they can communicate? In sort of Guy Kawasaki's world, are they lonely boy 64s who are going to spend most of their time in their back bedroom cracking out code without speaking to anybody?
Right.
Or are they going to be a proper team player?
Right.
And also having the confidence that when you hire leaders as well, you want to hire somebody into a management position. In our game, in our world, we're always promoting people into positions of incompetence.
Yeah.
Either because that's the only way you can figure out how to pay them more money.
Right.
We've got to make him a manager. So
Right.
we took this first-class lead developer and turned him into a crap manager.
Yeah. You see that everywhere in the software industry. Everywhere.
And it's sometimes just simply the way to get around the pay structure.
Yeah.
You want to pay them more money.
Yeah.
Because you want to keep them because they're brilliant. Well, the pay structure means we've got to turn them into a manager. They don't want it. You don't want it.
Right.
But we do it.
Right.
And then, being... I do a thing about leadership. Engineers are creatives.
Mm-hmm.
They are not what people imagine. Boiler room, overawed monkeys. Feeding coal into the furnace. They are creatives.
Yeah.
If you give them the right structure and guardrails, they invent stuff.
Yes.
They make stuff. We
Yeah.
make stuff. You're a
Yeah.
developer. I'm a developer.
Yeah.
The
It's fun.
biggest thrill we get is writing code.
Yes.
And the further up the food chain you go, the less code you write. But I think I always feel that it's important that, even at VP level, I write code. Not for production, maybe. Not allowed to do that. But
I won't tell anyone.
No. I'd sneak a few lines in everything. I work on the stuff that other people don't want to work on.
Mm.
Say, Steve, that legacy PHP app, and I think, I hate PHP.
Yeah.
The first page of the how to do PHP is choose something else. I hate it. But I know everybody else hates it. And and if I wanted just a kind of a little bit of respite from being a VP, I'll look at this stuff because at least it is debuggable and it's pretty straightforward to work out.
Yeah.
So it keeps your hand in, it keeps you in touch with what people in the org are doing.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned PHP because my next podcast guest is Mr. PHP, the founder of PHP. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. I don't. It was my first language, if you will. Well, I always thought hiring.
No, do you know what the thing is?
Yeah.
Modern PHP development looks just like Java. It's not what it used to be. What's PHP used to stand for? Something
Pre-hypertext preprocessor.
Yeah,
something like that.
Right. That was Noddy when it first came out, but that was its joy. Play it again.
Yeah.
Play it again. Play it again. Oh, got it right. Excellent. That's
Yeah.
that. Yeah. It was so immediate.
Yeah.
And now you see PHP development, and it's all object oriented. It's modern.
Yeah,
They've even got an injection framework. They've got all this sort of stuff. It's all caught up.
There's frameworks like Laravel that are taking off. WordPress is all PHP.
Yeah,
and that's huge. They did some things really well though. Not to go on a huge tangent. Their documentation had so many code samples from people just contributing. That was fun. That's how I learned on the code samples before I ever bought a book.
And do you know what? That's one of the things that separates industrial programming from hacking.
Yeah.
Hawkessedley, I'm still using the same things that they taught me there, the same mantras, the same. There's no shortcuts to high quality software development. Everything's massively more aggregated. It's much more effective now. A few lines of code and you've created a website.
Right.
But the paradigm still remains.
Yeah.
Undocumented code is unmaintainable code.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a subscriber to this. I think in code. Yeah. Well, if you think in code, you're not thinking in my team. That's for sure. Where you think is you draw stuff on your pad. You draw it out. You think it out. And then you start typing up, and you document it. You put comments in your code. I know comments are regarded by some as overhead. Yeah, they are. They're a necessary overhead. It's like saying, I haven't got any tests in my, because they're an overhead. I've got to maintain the tests. Yeah, that's the job.
Anytime someone tells me that they don't write a test, I just look at them and I think, like, you don't want to be lazy. Tests let you be lazy. You know it's going to work. You know that if you make another change later, your thing's probably not going to break. Yeah. It's a mystery otherwise.
And I think, it's a fine line, really. Like TDD, I'm not a great fan of. Paired programming has its place. But there's no get around the good people doing good work that are well-led, motivated, curious, these sorts of things. But they're working from a standard that's been set by the team, This is the thing that we really suffer from in this industry now. People come into it, well, who do you learn from? The guy sitting next to you's only got 3 years in the job, 5 years. Where do you find the guys with 40 years of experience and they're just retiring and tell you all the shitty stuff that, they've done, so you don't do it, Because, for the most part, functional programming is new, different styles of programming come and go, but the fundamentals are still the same. You write the code, you document it, you test it.
Yeah.
And you make that process as simple and as easy and straightforward as possible.
Yeah. Not to keep talking about PHP, but I have one more thing that I miss about the PHP days. And that one thing is one of the early podcasts on this.
var dump.
No, but that,
the best debugging tool in the world.
That's not terrible. That's not terrible, right? Like, it's, like print debugging. No, was or is, I think it's still what people do today. It was, in my opinion, the easiest, if you want to build a website and you need a programming language behind it, it's the easiest thing to deploy in the world. Because every host, the $1.99 web host to the whatever, they all have PHP. You just drag and drop and it's deployed. You can't do that with 90%. Well,
no, that's true.
Yeah.
And, and that's in some respects that, you see the sort of advances in things like Java. I'm a Java guy. I used to be a C guy, and before that I was an assembler guy. And,
right.
Pascal.
And before that,
so when I was talking about the algorithm that controlled the bogs, that was Pascal.
Interesting. Huh.
But I fell in love with Java 20 years ago, and I've never seen really any reason to change that.
Yeah.
Partly because what the Java community does, and the owners of Java, Oracle and others, is they see the trends that are happening in others, and they mimic them.
Right.
Scala.
Right.
Languages are based on the JVM
Right.
to catch up, I suppose, with some of the trends. Nowadays, we're doing a lot of work with Java Fibers, which is virtual threads. It takes it right away back to JDK1 when everything was a virtual thread, and then it could take advantage of physical cores, but threads are expensive.
Right.
So you put them in a pool, an
Right.
execute a pool, and all this sort of thing. The version 19 and version 21, when it's a full first-class citizen, is going to turn that paradigm on its head, because a standard JVM running on a 4-core, 8-gig laptop can have 1 million threads.
Yeah. Wow.
Now you think about that. That's functional programming. I don't need asynchronous programming.
Right.
I just have now, I'll run my application through, this is the execution path. I don't need to push an event and wait for a response, push another and wait for another response. That async model that makes debugging so bloody hard.
Right.
Don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
No, I literally will go back to, I call this, I call that, I call that, I call that, I call that, and the operating system I will run that on its own thread. I've got 1 million of those.
Yeah. Wow. So, speaking of that, that's sort of a bit about the future of all this stuff. Where do you see the future of contact centers going?
So what we're seeing is that AI and ChatGPT and these kinds of things, these tools, are going to have a significant impact. They already are.
Right.
But it's going to grow and grow and grow. When you phone a contact center, generally now, you will go through an IVR. You go through this process of press this, do that, and can you say this, can you do that? But eventually you end up with an agent. Increasingly, voice bots are going to have a much bigger role to play there, because they'll, in real time, transcribe what you're saying.
Right.
Run it through a chat GPT of all the responses that have been made before, or from everything else in the business, and give you actually a very good qualified response.
Yeah.
About answering your query.
Right.
No human involved at all.
Yeah.
So that sort of stuff. You'll see stuff like which we're doing right now is a call comes in, you're actually talking to an agent.
Right.
And this is probably a common experience. The agent will say, I need to speak to somebody in another department.
Yes. Yes.
And what they're doing is they're putting you on hold. They're using another second line to call that and say, right, I've just been talking to Matt.
Yeah.
He's got a problem with his router and this and that.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Well, increasingly, what it would already have done is there'll be a button to say, I want to talk to another expert. The ChatGPT or other speech-to-text and analysis would have summarised the whole conversation you've had,
right,
passed it to that guy before you've even transferred the call to him, so he can read a summary and know exactly what you've been talking about.
Huh.
So the need to speak to him, it becomes then potentially unnecessary.
Right.
So all kinds of interesting ways in which this kind of technology is going to have an impact to make effectively the contact center much more efficient.
Right.
And voice will play a diminishing role in that. Increasingly, people want to talk as you say, they want to talk to you in the way that's convenient for them.
Right.
And that might be a web chat, might be an SMS, WhatsApp, Telegram, could be anything. They want a first-class experience. And phoning somebody is actually a bit painful, a bit annoying.
Right.
Especially if it puts you through a whole load of IVR. Whereas if you can be a bit more asynchronous and do it via text or WhatsApp or something.
Right.
And so I think we see that slowly growing.
Okay, interesting. So the future is a lot more AI and a lot of. It seems like the whole goal of everything is to just shrink the amount of time that you have to, speak to a person or research or.
Yeah, I mean, it's always about balancing the time it takes for an agent to answer, because that's expensive.
Yes.
Any human being involved in it means that it's expensive. It's balancing that with having a good authoritative response.
Right.
Because it's one thing, you phone up and you get to talk to a robotic voice. Yeah, Matt, I want great. You're pissed off. Everybody's pissed off. Nobody, that's not great. Even if it was actually gave you a good answer, don't want that. So it's balancing that kind of thing with the time that you spend talking to an agent.
Right.
Efficiency.
Efficiency is key.
Yeah,
time is money.
Well, you go into a call center, a contact center, you'll see wall boards up, big screens, like in a knock. You're seeing all these alarms and all of these tables and everything else.
Right.
And what they're telling you is the efficiency of the data center.
Right.
What's the efficiency of the agents? Who's the most efficient agent? Who's got spare time? An agent takes a call in a high volume contact center. They take the call, they talk to you. When the call is finished, they have what we call a wrap-up time to type up the consequence of the call into the CRM system. You can control how much time they're allowed to do that.
Are they all fast typers?
Because that's lost time.
Yeah.
So we have contact center operators who set that to 0.
No summary.
Well, you're typing it up while you're taking the next call.
Oh.
Now you can only do that in certain circumstances because the experience for the end caller
can't be very good.
Might not be very good.
Yeah.
But that's what people are driving for. Fast throughput. Get these things, answered. Move on to the next one.
Do you see? Well, okay. So let me ask this: do you see what size contact centers are you normally seeing, and what's the smallest you've seen?
The smallest one we have on our books is one.
One person?
One person.
And that's just the person that also pays the bills and does the whole thing, huh?
Well, generally, in that instance, I think we have half a dozen of those. It's not very many.
Yeah.
But we do have contact centers that have got 5.
Okay.
Now, that's a contact center whose primary purpose is not providing contact center facilities. It is to sell cars or to service boilers or to do something else.
Right.
And they've grown to a certain size that a standard phone system is not going to do it for them.
Right.
People out on the road, so they need people that supply service locally. And one of the beauties of the 8x8 contact center is because it's completely browser based and you can switch it on and off, you can float those licenses around. So generally, it's a customer maybe with 100, 200 employees, of which 5 run the contact center.
Right.
And feed those leads and those service requests and everything else to the rest of the workforce.
Do we have contact centers, or does 8x8 have contact centers where there's no one using phone?
We don't, but increasingly we are being requested to provide that.
Interesting.
A digital only.
Uh-huh.
And that's gaining some traction too in the industry.
Right.
Is just taking interactions via WhatsApp.
Right.
Web chat, this kind of thing. There's a growing trend towards that. Having phones and a phone system requires you to have a carrier connection. Requires you to have a phone number.
Right.
So you've got to provision a phone number and this kind of thing. So those kind of customers generally, plenty of exceptions, but that really encourages a kind of pop-up contact center.
Right.
We were talking earlier about, a contact center for an event.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. It's not so easy to do with a phone number because the phone number you want to use for lots of channels and lots of things.
Right.
It's still possible. Calls come in and you divert them to different parts through the IVR. But a digital only contact center that is.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of motion in that.
Yeah. I think this bird has something to say about that if this is being picked up. Okay, interesting. Yeah. So, I think it would be interesting because, I used to be in the music space, the event space, live events, and we did, we worked with artists, like Beyonce and Selena Gomez and Adele and Guns N' Roses, and we worked with them on tour all across the world. And so there was always people, we mostly used email. We weren't super sophisticated in our, support offerings or whatever. But we did have a phone number, and it did have a very basic, PBX and an IVR to say, who do I go to? And that was because that was a requirement to accept credit cards for that company.
Yeah.
So we processed credit cards on behalf of all these artists, and so we had to have a phone number in case there's a dispute or whatever. And it saved us a lot of time and money when people would issue a chargeback, because a lot of the times, this is just a short tangent, a lot of the times at smaller concerts, you would find that we'd get a phone call and say, what is this thing? Like, a $30 charge on my credit card. You said, do you have a son or daughter? And I said, yeah. I said, did they go to a concert last night? Yeah. Did they come home with a t-shirt? Yeah. That was it. They used your credit card and bought a t-shirt.
And when you were talking about, integrations with other systems, there you go. A point of sale system and an inventory system, a purchase history system,
right?
Not a CRM, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, when you were saying, what's the smallest, we reach down to that, but also, generally, our customers are much larger concurrency, and they're geographically spread. And that's one of the other things about contact center and the phone interaction. You need a phone system that's geo-redundant. That if you're calling from Australia, it's not costing you a fortune to phone the US.
Right.
You're phoning an Australian carrier and then via the phone system you're getting to the agent. So most, if not all, contact centers have to have a very close relationship with a phone vendor.
I see.
8x8, we are the phone vendor. We
right.
are, that's probably what we're more famous for.
Right.
But in every other contact center, they will integrate with a phone system because it's absolutely key.
Right.
Low cost, high reliability, global comms. Right. Without that, your contact center looks very weak.
Okay. So what would you say is, if someone wanted to get into this space, building the software that powers this stuff for the future of the integrations for contact centers, how do they get into it? What's your phone number?
Oh, you mean if they want to come and work for us?
Or for you or for anyone. Like, how do you get into this space?
Who wouldn't want to work for me? Well, if people are genuinely interested in this area, they'll, you look up the vendors and find out. There's some based in Silicon Valley, others based, right around the world. But
do you need a history in?
No.
Do you need to have been an agent answering
No.
phones?
So I joined the company 4.5 years ago.
Right.
Before that, it was industrial IoT.
Okay. Oh,
I
okay.
knew nothing about contact centers
Okay.
or phone systems for that matter.
Right.
No, I mean it's a niche industry.
Right.
Yeah, there's thousands and thousands of people in it, and there's millions of people who use the software. But it's a niche industry, so they aren't walking the street. There aren't experts in contact centers for X or Y walking the street.
Right.
So it's fairly specialized.
Right.
So we never expect anybody to have any knowledge. When they come in, we're looking for good first-class developers.
Right.
Good people. Don't have to be a genius. The stuff that we do is, as you can tell, super interesting. Super interesting.
Well, once you start peeling back the onion, it's actually quite fascinating.
Yeah, it is. There's more to it than meets the eye, and as there is in most things. In the advent of AI and now skills-based and attribute-based routing, decision-making, and this, it's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
We're microservice-based. We're based on the Cloud 8 system, so it's really cool. We stand up services, they inject themselves into the process. We do a delivery of our front end, automated, no fingers on keyboards, every single day. The processes behind that, when we write code, it comes from a story or it comes from a Jira ticket that says make some changes. Developer makes the changes. He gets two guys to agree that they're the right changes. They go into the code. The QE and the automation make sure that it's right.
Yeah.
That gets committed to the master. The master gets built every night. It's evergreen. And the next morning it's deployed to production.
Right.
Without anybody touching it.
Right.
We used to have a big green button that started that process. Now we have a big red button that stops the process. So it's a bit like, we introduced it on the basis a bit like the newspaper industry.
Right.
Start in the morning. There's an editor's meeting with all the journalists. So what the hell are we going to put in the paper today?
Right.
And then it's a headlong rush to try and fill the paper up. And it used to be, because I worked in the newspaper industry as well, you get to 4 o'clock or whatever, the cut-off, when the presses have to start running, when they finish filling up the typesetting, it doesn't matter that there's gaps now, because the paper's got to, otherwise it can't get distributed.
You don't get anything.
Yeah. So we introduced that to our CD process. There's a cut-off, and what's in is in, what isn't in. You have to wait till tomorrow.
Huh. That's cool.
And it's work. I mean, we've been doing it for over a year. Now, that's all part of making a contact center. So there's facets of it which are really modern, really great, and got nothing really to do much with connecting an agent to a call.
Yeah. What's the most interesting use case of a contact center you've seen?
Most interesting.
Or most impressive, or most something you never expected? Support's the obvious one, right? To me, support's the obvious one.
Yeah, I'm trying to think actually. We've got contact centers which use fax.
What?
Fax. No, we don't. It's not an interaction
It's gotta
type.
be the slow. Oh, okay. I was gonna say that's gotta be the slowest.
Well, emails. Yeah, fax and emails slower.
Okay.
And we've got whole businesses that don't communicate with their customers except for through email.
Wow. Yeah.
Very large businesses, book publishers.
Okay.
So that all of their orders come through the system via email.
Okay.
They have no voice interactions at all, no text, no nothing, just email.
Interesting.
Thousands of them, thousands a day. We have others that are calling out. So outbound, really tough, really, aggressive outbound calling. We have people who offer counselling services for people who are having mental health issues. Myriad. I mean, we have ticket sales, we have airlines, we have a whole myriad of different use cases.
Yeah.
I mean, 8x8 Contact Center, it's not a 30,000 concurrency type contact center. It's cloud-based, sit anywhere you like, do your work from an airport lounge or from a cafe or whatever.
Beach.
A beach. Beach. From a beach. With a sweet spot of, a couple of thousand concurrencies. Very high value. Generally, customers that they're selling something or they're providing a service that's of high value.
Right. That's good to know. Any final words or anything, any shout outs? Your family, anyone that, might listen to this podcast?
God,
the 4 million people that subscribe.
Yeah, I hope none of my family listens to this.
You'd be surprised.
Do you know what the thing about it is? I've worked in so many different industries. I started off in defense.
Mm-hmm.
I went to document management, industrial IoT. I was a consultant for another American company that sent me to go and work in the oil industry, the newspaper industry, legal, a lot. But what you find is that it's glib to say it's sort of the same shit, different day, But this sort of constant striving for good quality, good standards, you find good people at the bottom of it. And there's no substitute for working with good people.
Yeah.
And I don't mean, wholesomely good necessarily. That's nice, but they know what they're doing.
Right.
And it doesn't matter whether they're green as grass straight out of university or got 40 years of experience. It's a mindset, this game. And actually, the one thing you must have is a sense of humour.
A sense of humour.
Jesus Christ! I mean, you want to live long in IT.
Yeah.
It can kill you. This stuff.
Yeah.
The disappointment, the anxiety, the stress.
Oh, absolutely.
You never remember the wins. You always remember the losses. You've got to have a sense of humour.
Right.
When things are going not very well.
Right. Got to laugh.
You've got to maintain some sort of sense of perspective.
Yeah.
It's work. It's not real life.
Right. Oh, on that note, well, thanks for being here, Steve. I appreciate it.
No worries, mate.
All right.
Nice talking to you.